So let's step back and take a look at the full interaction of the client side and the server side via an API. I'm going to do some visualization. There are four entities here. First, we have the application interface, which is the browser. Then we have the entire backend application, which hosts the code for both our APIs and the business logic. Then we have the database. In any standard web application, the client or the application interface first makes an API request to the backend in order to achieve some functionality. A real-world example would be doing a search on google.com. The browser is making an API request to get search results back from Google's backend application. The API request will make its way to the backend application and first hit the API. The API acts as a gateway, so it's going to check that the request is valid and complete. So using the Google search example, the API will receive the request from the front end. It's going to take a look at the request and it may say, hey, you didn't include a search term. I need the search term in order to send you back some search results. So if the API request does not contain a search term or an invalid search term, then the API will spit back an error. If the API request passes the smell test, the API will hit some business logic. That business logic will interact with the database. The database will return some information to the backend application. The business logic will then take that information and package it in a way that is acceptable to the API. The API checks that the response is valid and complete. And finally, the API returns the response to the front end. So we just saw the full interaction between the client side and the server side via an API. I mentioned previously that there is often confusion around what an API is. I want to quickly clarify where that confusion is coming from. The API in and of itself doesn't do all that much. It just defines what a request and response should look like. Without the business logic, the API is basically a useless outlet. This is why colloquially, when we refer to APIs, we often bundle the API in with the business logic. So again, the technical definition of an API is just an outlet defining a request and response. But in the real world, when you hear the words create an API, it's often referring to creating both the API as well as the business logic that powers it.